And the White House says it's not giving up on tighter background checks for gun buyers. But this weekend, the NRA wrapped up its annual convention, promising no compromise in opposing new gun laws.
So where is the middle ground? Republican pollster and CBS News analyst Frank Luntz is with us. Frank, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me just ask one big question. The NRA says it's about the Second Amendment. If you are trying to influence the conversation about gun control and for gun control, what are the words you ought to use?
Well, first off, it shouldn't be gun control. It should be public safety. The American people are less interested in the issue of guns and more interested in the sense of safety and security. Second is that those who propose this legislation, they're on the majority side of the American people, 80% of Americans. And about 70% of gun owners support the legislation, the compromise right now. And yet the reason why it isn't doing well is that the message itself isn't communicating to the people in this case who matter most, which are gun owners themselves. If I were to ask, there are about 25 people in the studio right now. If this were America, over 40% would own a gun. The key is to communicate to them that they have the right to do so.
But Frank, that doesn't make any sense. If you're saying the messaging is wrong, then why do 80% of the people support it?
But that's why it hasn't passed. That's exactly the point. How can you get 80% of Americans who support this legislation, and yet the Senate didn't vote for it?
Well, then that would suggest the problem is political courage.
It's not. The message is not being communicated. The Republicans are afraid to vote for it because they're afraid of a primary on the right. The 5 Democrats who don't want to vote for it, they're afraid of the general election because they're from southern states. So you can see the political dynamic at play here.
But Nora's right. It's political courage. People do not want to go against the argument that they see in primaries about the political pressure can be brought.
It's half about political courage, but for some of these people, it also is about principle. And it's very hard to have this conversation in the Northeast because what we think here in New York or Philly or Washington, D.C. is very different than what they think in Dallas or Houston.
It's about what principle?
The question is whether you are dealing with the Second Amendment and rights that gun owners believe are sacred versus those who see that the ease and ability of getting guns and putting guns in the hands of people who should not have them, that it is tantamount that you get those guns away from them.
But they use words, Frank, like over the weekend. They're coming after us to destroy us, never surrender. You can't take away our guns. So how do we change the messaging on both sides?
And that is the whole problem. And it's the reason why I enjoy shows like this, because you can actually talk about how divided we are based on principle.
So how would you frame it? How would you frame it?
I would be doing ads right now into these Republican areas saying I'm a gun owner and a lifetime member of the NRA, but I still believe that if you are mentally unstable, you should not have access to a gun. And there's no reason to have clips that are 15 bullets long.
Well, but that's Senator Manchin right there.
But that's the point.
But I just want to clear this up.
I want to do it from the perspective of an NRA member, not from the perspective of a
But you're talking about how to influence the Congress, not the influence of people. Because as Nora said, the people already say 82% are there. So it's just about Congress.
Correct.
Okay.
And it really is this divided. And Charlie, I do hope that at some point you're going to have a conversation about the values that we hold, the core principles that we have, because the truth right now is, and I wish it were not this case, Republicans and Democrats don't just think differently, they behave differently, and it becomes almost impossible to find that common ground.
Right. Well, the conversation will certainly continue. Thank you, Frank Luntz.
Thank you.